Good. I mean, short week here. I'm on weekend tonight, so that's going to be nice. One good thing the war was good at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tried that Jupyterlite thing. I've been trying to play around with it. It's really slow in the browser. I mean, that's the only thing of any interest. And apart from that, I've just been refactoring a bunch of everything. So it works a bit nicer. And we were talking about getting the CI/CD workflow working a bit. It works on our infrastructure. Yeah, being French, they went private cloud. So we don't have GCP or AWS or anything. We have a cluster somewhere that runs that runs Docker. But yeah, so I mean, it's open, it's live, like our stuff. So.
Cool. So what was slow? Because did you say that Jupyterlite was slow, or is it Pyodide? Is it slow?
So I tried Pyodide.
Pyodide. Sorry, yeah.
Pyodide.org, and that seemed really quick. But like I said in the talk, I think what seems useful is having a way to create graphs quickly. And Pyodide, I tried to do matplotlib.scatter, and it just goes runtime error, WebAssembly died. And in the Jupyterlite, I'm just like trying to run import NumPy, and it doesn't import NumPy. It's taking forever to import NumPy. So I'm not sure what's happening there. The other interesting thing is I opened it up yesterday, did something, opened it up again today, and it's got all my notebooks. But I'm just wondering where it saved them on my machine. So I don't know where these things are being stored.
It's probably in like local storage or something.
You also get that, the red bar across the top there, which kind of shows that Curvenote's not happy.
Yeah, that's in Jupyterlab dev mode. So we like hook into something, and I think it looks like our extension would have failed to do the next thing.
Your import NumPy seems to have worked fine. I don't know what's happening. It might be Safari versus Chrome. Like Safari is generally not good for most
Safari.
things.
Yeah, the red line is us probably just attempting to attach and then not.
You haven't, yeah. Maybe I'll look into that.
Because WebAssembly, I mean, the JavaScript objects will still be visible, will they? Or not? Or that's going to be completely opaque?
I mean, this is all Jupyterlab, so I don't understand why. To like us, you mean? To Curvenote? Yeah, no, I have no idea why this would fail.
Yeah, I've not done enough. I haven't done anything at all with WebAssembly.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working in Firefox. Oh, yeah, it did come in.
Interesting.
Have you done any WebAssembly before, Rowan?
Dabbled, but nothing serious, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is us interfering with something in their world, but I don't see any errors.
Yeah, I had to poke around in the console to look for the usual object and stuff, but it seemed that I was getting some different stuff back. I don't know.
There's also a classic mode. I don't know if that had a problem.
No, we also don't. And they're using a new classic mode. They're using like single view mode. Like this isn't the new one. This isn't actually classic. That's
Jupyterlab though.
Yeah.
They've got a classic version, so I'm saying, yeah, like let's try it with classic. Yeah. It's not pure classic, yeah.
Yeah, it's Jupyterlab's version of the single view layout.
Because you've got the single thing down. You've got the simple view as well, haven't you, in Jupyterlab?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, interesting though. Because then so the Pyodide is just run some Python without needing a Python backend.
Yeah.
That works really quickly inside a console. Like when I've been doing stuff, there's like
In
a
Pyodide.
test
Mhm.
in the rep or whatever it's called, REP, the repo. That's it.
The REPL.
REP REPL. Yeah. But yeah, you just get a console. So,
Okay, but there's no plotting.
no, when I tried to run the plot, that's where it come back saying runtime error, where assembly died, it can't do something.
Yeah, it's probably got no
again,
context to plot to. Or...
Yeah, which is expected. I mean, I think
Yeah.
this is probably pretty new stuff.
Yeah, cool.
It could be a cool way to
Cool to keep playing around with.
Like if you could run stuff, I mean, you wouldn't have to have a server. The computer's done on the client side, and you could get basic plots done. I'm just thinking about like the hardest bit would be getting data to it, but you could effectively add your plots in line inside a Curvenote editor. In a way.
Yeah.
There's someone else doing similar stuff to that. I think it's called Starboard. .gg apparently, which is an online notebook that is this guy. And so it's completely local, and they're doing JavaScript and Python through Pyodide, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what UV's working on? Because I've seen UV was talking about he was doing something like this, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, no, I don't know. He's doing a bunch of work for 2ITC at the moment.
Okay.
So not sure on. I think I know what tweet that you were talking about. Yeah.
I have sent it to you or something. I can't remember.
Cool. Well, we're just finishing lining up things. After our drive run deploy yesterday, that prompted some changes. So we're ready for another. We fixed up a bunch of stuff, ready for another drive run deploy, and then into prod today. Stroke tomorrow. Today. I would love to be today.
Yeah.
But we've got a bit of a moving target as well, because I think Rowan's been doing some stuff on images and around that have slightly changed the API and the way the Latex come back. So I think we might have to do some work to get ahead on that and make sure everything's lined up for when we go out. We might have to take that on today. But this is up on our dev environment, and this is the sort of changes we went through over the last week. Because last week we were playing around with these ideas about having this sort of wizardy-based approach in the first cut before we put templates on. And that's in place now. And of course, I'm in a bad state because I've been testing. I'm just going to save a new version. This is all expected. This is all part of the show. Yeah. So if I save a new version, of course, when you save a new version, you're not going to have any artifacts associated with it. So I can go ahead and download LaTeX, which I'm expecting to work. And that's going to fire off the container, pull the LaTeX, and then we've got the LaTeX zip there. And we can download the zip from here now, or we can just dismiss that. And we should have also got a notification. And the notification brings you back to the article. And then you'd come here and download your LaTeX again. That was an old notification, looks like. Let's jump to the latest. It was on version 14, was I?
You're on version 13.
Oh yeah, 14 is the one I just saved. Yeah. So the idea is the notifications, which is now a notification tray up here, that's going to bring you back to the right version of the article that you exported on. And so then you can access the LaTeX or the PDF from there, rather than you having a link directly in there, which might expire at some point. Because we sort of provide signed links for download, and they have a timeline on them. So as I said, we just bring you back here. That's great. And then the PDF works in the same way, but that one will fail right now. And that's because of the API change. We need to tweak
Does the PDF
LaTeX
build
output
with the classic class then? Like a
Well,
default CLS?
I have been experimenting, and we're going to come up with a couple of default templates. And this is my first experiment, which is to improve just the ZLaTeX one, which has massive margins. They really like 2 inches of white space around the edges. So I just changed that up a bit. So there's a title page on now with a Curvenote logo, and it's making a bit better use of the width. And we've got a bit of a header going on. There's still some stuff to play with because there's still a bit of white space around there, and the maths aren't nicely separated, but I'm just playing with that. It's loosely based on the archive template that has been just hacked around a bit. And I'm more than open for some help on, on LaTeX classes. Definitely.
Never created a LaTeX class myself.
Have you not? Okay. Well,
No,
you've done more
no.
LaTeX layout than me anyway, I think. But,
just fighting with it during my PhD and submitting papers and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So if we get this into a nice shape, then that could be a better default one. I've seen some very nice report-based ones, for example, on different LaTeX template galleries, and they have a nice bit of styling for the code where you get a slightly grey background around the code block. I've even seen some with syntax highlighting in, I think.
I've done the syntax highlighting for the code chunks before.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's, I forget what the package was, but I could dig that up and figure out how to do that again. Yeah.
So it'd be nice to do that and get a template that supports the
nice
various
defaults.
Content nicely.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And of course the figure captions and stuff which you're just bringing in.
Yep.
So
this is fantastic.
That's a step forward anyway.
Are you still writing papers, Wesley?
Thank God. I haven't written a paper in 5 years, I think. No. People in my work group are nice enough though, because I produce nice figures that they just add me to the paper count, but I'm not writing anything.
Right on. Yeah. That's super cool. I'm stoked for this to get over the line. This is especially with that nice template that you put in there, Steve. Is that's pretty solid. Yeah.
I think we're going to get it out there, and then we're just going to keep improving it because it has to be sort of improved in lockstep with all the as we progress the article, the content, the equation numbering, the captions. We're going to have to keep nudging the rendering of the PDFs forward, no?
Yeah,
and then
totally.
tweaking the LaTeX. So just bringing this up. I don't know if you want to speak to some of this, everyone, or even demo. I can give you.
Yeah, maybe I'll.
Don't know if you're in a good state to.
Give me 2 seconds, and I will be.
Yeah. So if you're not writing papers, does that mean you've stopped writing altogether, Wesley?
All right,
Reports
code.
or code?
All right, code. Never wrote reports really particularly. I use Curvenote is I've been using it for the meeting notes more than most stuff.
Is that, and are you bringing your like Jupyter outputs into there as well?
Yeah, that's what I've been using it mainly for. So I try to, each week we run a Friday meeting where we just catch up on Python interactive computing stuff that can be useful. And I've just used it to like have everything set up. But I've also got galleries and stuff like that equally. So I mean, that's what I was looking. I'm going to try looking at using the Python package to push stuff automatically into there.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's pretty much what I do. I just manually copy stuff over. Yeah, I'm not particularly keen on writing papers. It takes too long. I write lots of notebooks, but there's more documentation sort of stuff than actual reports or anything.
It's totally fair. Yeah, so on the image caption side of things, so we've added two pieces. So you can throw images as usual by pasting or dragging them into a content block. And now there's this piece here that says show hide caption. And so you can add that, and then by default, it's just the image name. And then to edit that caption, you actually can, oh, that's super strange. Need that to be below the modal. Oh, well, I'll do that next time. And you can add a title, which is what is hovered when you're hovering over, and that's like a tooltip shown. And then the description is the alt text for screen readers. And then the image caption, this is why it was taking a little bit of time, is that this is rich information. So this actually has things like inline math. You can have, I don't know, like emojis and all of that jazz. I'll make that a +1. And then also citations as well, which I don't have any in this project. But you could even have like inline, I don't know, sliders and dynamic text in there as that gets improved, which is kind of cool. And so that then throws that back into the image as a caption. And you can actually see that now in the version. So we're actually updating the version of this image block. So it's this sort of standalone thing that can be reused in different places. And so I could surf back in time and see how the captions changed. And then one of the reasons that is nice is that you can copy a link to this and then paste it into your project as a standalone block completely. And
you
so
can
that's
no longer edit the bottom.
This caption, you mean?
Yeah.
You edit it through this modal interaction, and so you can edit that, but it's sort of like it's not in this draft state like the rest of the content. It's actually like you commit a new version basically as you're going.
You don't have an edit button on the bottom one.
Yeah, the second one.
So
what you only have to edit
is
the initial
a
one.
work in progress for that one.
Do you get in through that menu? Yeah.
The edit button is over here in the block settings now, and that's exactly the same, but in a weird place. So these two need to actually be made to be the same, and there's some other changes over here that just need to in the process of working through.
Well, can you adjust the width? Will you be able to adjust the width?
In this one, yes. In this one, not yet. And I think yes, you will be able to do that for sure. Yeah. It's like it's a little bit, and I don't know if this makes sense to you, Wesley, but this is now a standalone referenceable thing. Like it's this block, which is now living inside of another block of content. So you're referencing something else, and that's where this interaction, we're trying to make it as smooth as possible, but it is still a little clunky in that you have to like come out, jump out, start editing that sort of information.
Can you
I
add
was-
more than one figures as well? So when like you got like a figure A, B, C, D, sort of like format, little grid idea. Can you like if you drop something else in, or is it just be like figure 1, figure 2? You see what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
sub-figures.
do. Yeah, I've been looking at a lot of those sorts of figures, and I think that we can do a good job of that. Right now, this is a single figure or single image, and maybe there's like another block that is able to hold a few of these sort of figures that can all be at immutable versions.
So I guess like the
And
same
I
thing could work with equations as well, couldn't it? So like you can have like a block of equations, and you can have like equation A, B, C, D.
Yeah, I think that's like something that I think is super cool out of that Liz has been working on. It's GeoSci. She's working on this equation bank or equation index, and right now it's all individual equations, and she's added like alt text and titles and descriptions to them, and like investing in this more than you would in a normal or like just if you're writing. But this means that I can again copy a link to that and bring it into my work and start working with from where Liz has started, and still need to deal with equation numbering in a much better way, or all sorts of numbering. And one of the things that Liz was saying yesterday is that she wants section numbering, and that's going to be a whole different challenge, I think, especially when we don't know, because we're like all of that section and numbering is done in a single pass in sort of a paper-based version, and then you're baking the numbers in. But as soon as you're doing this dynamically where you don't have access to all of that information, it gets certainly more complicated or harder to do.
It ends up having to be sort of a presentation pass at the end.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
like, for example, if I'm referencing this equation in somebody else's work, which could be even in multiple places, like the number, well, I don't know. Basically, numbering isn't a good identifier. Certainly not unique, and it changes all the time. So,
could you like just remove numbering and then just put it in it like compile time? Like, so when you're writing the document, it's just like where it says here, it's like figure 1, figure 2. It just says like figure, this is a rich AX, and then it says figure, this is a rich AX, and then when you say export to PDF, is that the part where you add in all the numbering automatically? And the other thing is like equations and stuff like that is when you import something, is like maybe you get like a box up and it says like keep numbering or something like that, or I don't know, like reload or automatically. You know what I mean? So like you have the choice to keep the numbering from the initial paper if that's of use. For example, like you're saying, equation 1.7 in Cockett now.
Yeah.
Or you could just like embed numbering into your book, into your paper, like use I don't know, use article numbering or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think I am underestimating how many variations of like numbering there are and how many different use cases, because this is also something like you probably want that to update. Like, for example, if this author comes in and edits their work over here, like the numbering should be dynamic in that project, and you're referencing into their work.
Oh, well, yeah. So,
and I mean, like, I think like the big thing is that like numbering doesn't make sense. Like, this is, if you think about hypertext and hyperlinks, is you would never encode that sort of information in that, like the link is the reference, whereas we've been, I don't know, like conditioned in the paper-based world of scientific referencing is that this artifact never will change. And then as soon as you take that out and allow those like things to change over time, even if the underlying equation doesn't change, then like all of the constraints are done from a numbering perspective, and like how you should reference them should sort of change, I think.
Yeah, so the two different situations you're talking about then is if you're writing your own paper with all your own equation definitions, then you have the layout. Let's just say that the sequential layout of the equations decides on their numbering, and you can do a pass to reconcile all the references if any of that changes. And that's fine, because that's a paper in its own world. But what you're talking about now is what happens when you step out and reference an equation in somebody else's paper, which is equation 3.1 from Crockett et al. And then you go and change your paper, and that equation now appears in section 2. So it's now 2.1. Are you saying that numbering reference should come through?
Yeah, like I think that's the question, and that is sort of similar. Like we can work around it for our own internal passes for an internal project, but even like between chapters, like at least at the moment, we're not doing a full render pass of your project. We are doing it dynamically on the page. So this figure 1 and figure 2 is me walking through the article at render time and saying this is 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so it's more difficult to do that on the entire graph.
Yeah. Because as well, you're referencing an equation, and imagine you're referencing version 5 of the equation. That equation has always had a unique ID plus its version 5 of, but the version might not change, although its position might, and then its position affects its position in a thing is what affects its. It's almost like the citations maybe shouldn't be direct. Maybe the citations need to go via some type of container, context container, if you want the numbering to make sense.
Yeah, that's certainly how I'm envisioning the referencing to work, is that you are not just referencing a paragraph or an equation, you're referencing a paragraph in a container. And then it's like, how deep do we want to go with that nesting?
It seems to me though that you would have like, I mean, I could probably be really wrong because I don't write too many papers, but like the equation numbering, so here it says equation 1.7. It seems to me that numbering should be consistent throughout your document, like your document. And I feel like in a paper, you'd do the same thing. It's like if I was writing a standard paper, I wouldn't use the number of some other guy's equation in my equation numbering. But on the other hand, is when I'm using the referencing to it. So like if I click on that, then it should go to the right version in the right spot in the other document. And in the same way, it's like when you do your document, so like when you reference a different paper, so like PERS 2006, whatever it was, the papers, is there, you should probably have the equation number of the original equation. So like you're saying, well, even like down the bottom. So like if it says like when you bring the equation in, it may be interesting to know where it comes from. So like I could see in here, like if you're referencing a figure or an equation from someone else's work, it would be nice to have like the little DOI that's added to it. So like at the end, it just automatically here says like Crockett 2017 equation 1.7 or something like that, just like in those little square brackets, automatically added because it's not your equation. And then if it comes from your work, like from your projects, is you could even maybe reference your own project sort of. I mean, yeah, it probably makes sense. I mean, that means that you're actually, because like if I was reading this as a document as a person, I would assume that equation was written by me, like is written by the author of that document, which isn't true in this case because it's actually referenced from a different document. So I would think, the equation numbering at the top where it says equation 1.7 should be consistent with the document. And at the end of it, if it's not at the end of it, no, whatever, is it should append automatically some sort of like cross-referencing to the original that's done. That's kind of like, I guess that's the nice bit. And like with the figures, it's the same thing in a way. It's like if you're using someone else's figure, is you don't have to worry about the the copyright. I'm trying to think what you're saying, like the referencing of the initial person is because that's where you imported it from their document, so it comes automatically with that information.
Yep. Yeah, and then yes, I completely agree. And right now, this is like we are actually referencing this rather than having a copy in my project with a reference to its parent. And so, like, if that sort of makes sense. So, like, for example, and this happened to me the other day with somebody's notebook output that I was using in a demo, is they actually made their repo private, and then my demo didn't work anymore. And so this is something that we also need to show, I think, to the user that this is like as a reference, and then you can like maybe click that and say make a fork of that, and have a copy now in my project, which maintains its link in history back to
The original.
The original, and then we can pull from that over time as well.
Yeah,
like
that makes sense.
Yeah, the GitHub fetch from upstream, but at this like super granular level.
It also like seemed to me though is like if you forked or like as you reference it is an equation, it should probably update over time unless you like click pin. So like for example, it's here is like if the equation gets updated, is it probably like I would expect it to update as well, because like the person might have done a typo, he might have adjusted it, and if you realize, like you might get a notification saying this equation has changed, like your imported equation has changed, and then if you realize it's no longer doing what you want it to do, is then you can click pin equation, like, and then it pins it to a set, like a commit, well, not commit, but the equivalent of a commit. I don't know what you guys are calling it, a revision number.
Yep. Yeah, totally. This idea of pinned and unpinned dependencies in your article and having forks and all of that side of things. Because I'm not sure how in this sense it's actually mostly, well, it looks like equation numbering and some updates to the caption that have changed. And whereas the actual equation and information there has not changed. So I would certainly like to take that information and pull it forward. And so this seems like, especially from a textbook, which is what is being built over here, that seems, like it makes sense to have like sort of unpinned dependencies from trusted sources that are actually referenced as well. Yeah.
And then dependable alert for when somebody changes them and you haven't. It's the same sort of thing. The need to be alerted about changes that you might want to incorporate. I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what people think of it, because we know the referencing is there. We know fundamentally that block is created somewhere else. But at the end of the day, I wonder if you're sitting writing a paper where you would normally sit with the equation editor and reproduce the equation to have your own reproduction over here. If people realize that what stepping away from that means, and the fact that you do have a reference to another block. And maybe that's where the fork, the sort of automatically forking as you include it, will help, because then you have reproduced it.
Yep.
But it's still linked.
Yep. Yeah, and then this will annoy anyone who thinks about plagiarism. Basically, because as soon as you export to a PDF or document all of that referencing and rich information about dependence history and attribution gets serialized down into a PDF output, and then you run it through your journal checkers plagiarism thing, and it says, well, this has been already written on the internet. Like,
yeah.
I think there's some people who say, yes, that's the point, is that we didn't have to spend the time to reword a paragraph or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of exciting to see these equation indexes and that side of things start to
I
grow
wonder
up.
if there's a way as well. It's like, because when you import, like you say, is like you didn't have to rewrite a paragraph because it's already been written somewhere. But in general, it's like when you reference someone in scientific world, is you rewrite their idea. It's not like a copy paste of a whole paragraph. So like if I just like, if you wrote a paragraph and then like I wanted to import that paragraph, I wouldn't expect to see like the name just at the bottom is like, if there's a new way example, like a new thing for showing that comes from somewhere else. So like, I don't know, it's like maybe above the blocks or something like in Latex, like above the whole paragraph or like next to the whole paragraph, it's got the actual call out for the whole reference just to show that this isn't been written or manipulated in any ways. Like I'm literally just, I want to include what he's saying, what he or she is saying because it's interesting, but there's no point in rewriting it because it's exactly the same. So like apparently what we're doing is there's a load of model, like we work with model simulations, and apparently in every single paper there's a big chunk of text that's just a copy paste of the same thing because the model doesn't change and you've got to explain how the model works. So everyone just like copies and pastes the model documentation, sort of like the phrase saying this is the model, does this. And yeah, effectively is rather than having some sort of name at the end of saying from blah 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 now, is you like give it a bit more attribute, I guess, saying like, yeah, this is their words.
Yeah.
And that's something I don't think is done at all in scientific writing. It could be.
Yeah, or it's done in like a super kludgy way. Because I mean, like that would be done with quotes, start, end, and then say excerpt from, and then but basically with brackets at the end of a piece of text with a lookup table at the end of your document. And so one of the other things that I in that same vein is if we're like going over, and sometimes like going over to like an overview chapter, for example, you can like copy parts of it. So like you actually want this sentence or something. And then I could copy that thing specifically and come over here and paste it in. And we could actually bring that information over and know that this piece actually came from some other referenced part in the Curvenote ecosystem. And that excerpt of text, and even though I'm changing it, there's like a decoration of this came from and internal referencing at sort of a light level.
You could end up like what was it, Dropbox that checked hashes of files to see if the file is already stored, and they just like like say, all right, it's over there. So you could so everyone effectively, like even if you had some dodgy material or something, is just like if there's someone on the Dropbox network that had the original, you just suddenly get the original file.
But this idea of like connecting and creating a graph of knowledge rather than always working through copy paste.
They can give some really nice visualizations afterwards, sort of like analyze scientific papers.
And I mean, like this is what people do today with the research graph and knowledge graph with the citation network. That I think last week Microsoft decided that they would just stop doing that, and all sorts of companies that rely on the Microsoft academic graph that is getting retired at the end of the year. But that's neither here nor there.
What was it? It's like a Google Scholar type database.
Google Scholar database of all of the like open citations and links to other papers. They're just
crawling it and build.
Okay. But this idea at like sort of a much more granular level of I'm actually pointing to this paragraph or this part of a paragraph inside of this context of an article, or this version of a previous figure that somebody made. Yeah, I think that would change all sorts of things about citations and credit as well.
I hear I hear all of the colleagues moaning about the problem is if you don't publish in these fancy papers, then you don't get the job as being a full-time professor sort of thing. It's like you've got to publish in Nature, and then if you publish like 2 times in Nature, it's like you're on the road. And then like, but if there's a better way to, like you're saying, credit and attribute the initial author, you could maybe bake that into a better system for designing what science is valuable, like who's making the most contributions. But it's kind of hard putting I mean, that's kind of like what happens already with the attribution, but you can't really, I don't know, you can't really attribute an idea, because the idea is like someone might write the same sort of thing. It's like, okay, they saw it initially with you, and then some really fancy guy that everyone loves writes the same thing, and then everyone just starts copying, like citing him and not you. I mean, that's kind of the problem. Yeah, I don't know. It's complicated.
I think one thing that this could surface is the idea of curation, I suppose, of being able to like come over to these sort of equation in like figure indexes, equation indexes, like, and people actually putting time into notation and presentation and that sort of thing. That's often something that is not as valued in the academic system. But if people are using that work and reusing it, then you can bring some of that value in and show that the people who are doing that sort of curation are valuable.
I can see it with equation indexes. Figure indexes is I can see it a bit more complicated.
I think conceptual figures maybe make more sense there. In sort of like the
yeah, it's like when you want to show what like a seismic wave is usually fingers like that, a reflector. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking I don't have it on the shelf. I think the Sheriff's Encyclopedic Dictionary of Geophysics, for example, is a reference tome just full of equations, definitions, example figures. That's an example of a curated work, no, that spans the entire field, and is referenced heavily. The only other modern one would be the SUG Wiki, but that isn't as authoritative, and doesn't get the maintenance and the curation needed, maybe because of the difficulty. Well, because people aren't working there from day to day. It's the thing. It's an extra thing, isn't it? Cool.
Awesome.
So in the meantime, we're gonna create a PDF. And maybe see if we can go beyond that. I don't know, because PDFs are underused as well. I mean, they're still a terrible format, but the usage of them is terrible as well. As in, because they can have links in, they can be richer, they can have 3D content in.
That's hard though, isn't it?
It's very hard.
Don't go
internal
3D.
APIs.
It's not worth it.
No.
You can only use maybe Flash as well, can't you, from memory?
Yeah.
Saying that though is like having, if you could export, like maybe one step under. Like, I mean, PDFs is what a PDF is. I mean, we all know how they're used. But having the Curvenote to HTML. Well, I mean, I know Jupyter Notebooks already does that, but having a Curvenote to HTML to be able to pass it around with the built-in JavaScript to have the interactive plotting still could be a nice feature. And like trying to move away. Okay, like, well, I guess that's just sharing your website, like sharing a link to the Curvenote article, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably just share the link and press publish.
I was gonna say it's just sharing the link because like with Jupyter Notebooks it makes sense because you can't share a Jupyter Notebook. Well, you can send it to someone, but they have to have a Jupyter server to run the thing.
Or you have to have a build pipeline or some way to
Yeah, which is what I was thinking.
host it.
The HTML, but
Yeah.
I guess with Curvenote there's no point in exporting to HTML just because you just send a link through to the.
It's
page.
already on the web, man. Yeah, just hit publish. Yeah.
But maybe if you had a private one and you didn't want to open up the project to someone, like I think I could say like maybe like I had a private project where my meeting notes, for example, and because a project you can only because remember you can only share a project with someone, you can't share an article.
Yeah, you can invite people to collaborate on your project. We've got an idea about sort of anonymous or sort of some type of hashed or secure link sharing. So you'd be able to give somebody a link where if they had the password or if they only have the link, for example, Google Docs style, they could access.
But that's only a project is what I'm saying. It was like I created something on my Curvenote called Notes or something like that. And then I started writing notes with you, I remember. Because like we did that real-time collaboration for the presentation. And then I went back and did another meeting with people from Paris and we wanted to do the same thing. And I was like, I can only give them my access to my whole project and not just one document. Which meant that they've had the possibility to see all the other notes that I'd written, which I mean, in one case, like you'd end up creating millions of projects per sort of like team or meeting group you're with. But definitely having a way to share an article.
I definitely want to see that come in. I think one of why that's hard in our setup right now is like articles have references to all of these other blocks underneath it. And then so like that I think is a little bit of a difficulty at the moment.
Yeah, like if you have it like a read only, I guess. So like if it's in the article, they can see it, that's fine. But if they can't go and see the other notebook or something like that to import it. So like they may have access to it. So like if I don't know, say I brought in a figure into the common meeting book, is like there you can go through the revisions, you can do it all like as normal, is we can update it and something like that, or like modify it as normally, but they can't see the other documents in themselves. So it has to be the owner or someone that has access to those files to bring them into the collaborative document. I mean, that's kind of like the same as if you're working on a Google Doc together. It's like I give you access to the Google Doc, and then if I want to go and grab an image out of a presentation or something, is I go and do that and then put it into the collaborative work. I think that makes sense as a workflow.
No, it totally does. And I'm excited to get there. It's super cool. Because then that actually, I think, well, hopefully gets to the place where it can replace a Google Doc style engagement.
I mean, like most people, you end up hacking around on Google Docs to write something quickly. I mean, some people do need it for the extra stuff, but I mean, Google Docs doesn't really have that much in it. Effectively, it's like it's a nice, simplified, easy to use Word. But then you can do most of that stuff with the Markdown and in Curvenote. I mean, there's no reason. It's just the sharing on a granular level.
It's totally the sharing. And I think some of the other stuff we've heard right now is that we don't have inline commenting, and that's something that's
that's another. Inline commenting and inline links as well. So like because I've got this big document now coming up with all of the like we've had a few weeks worth of comments of these meetings, and like if I want to say jump to this cell sort of thing, it's like almost a cell sharing. So it's like, look here, this is what you do. Like I've had it a couple of times, like people go, how do we do this again? It's like, I've wrote this down, and it's like you got to paste the link to the notebook to the article, and you got to go, okay, scroll down to weeks 2, and then it's like the third cell or something like that. So having that would definitely be very useful. Just like a jump to cell.
Have you tried to open his page on the block? and then
Yes.
using that link.
So you can use that, but there's also been cases that we've had where you've had like you need to have the context above it. So like each
Okay,
time
yeah.
I bring it in, it's like I write a little bit of documentation, like in Markdown,
Yeah, got you.
and then I'll do the code cell that actually does the code. So I mean, you can go through both of them. It's almost like when you got the GitHub, it's like you got GitHub on the left on the web UI, and then you click like permalink to this line or something
To
like
the
that.
line, yeah. Yep, totally.
Yeah, the open page I did try. I remember doing that with like the images. But, like someone asked me like, how do you create an image with what do you call it? So it's like, this is how you do the output or something like that, and then you got to go back and you got to send the rest of it through.
Yeah, jumping to the right place.
Awesome.
Super cool.
Well, we're going to get back to
Yeah.
Coding.
PDF generation.
Yeah. Good to see you, Wesley.
Yeah,
Yeah, good luck with
super
deployments.
cool.
Yeah.